last dash to sanctuary.
The operation targeting what it considers a terrorist organization.
Aung San Suu Kyi, once fated as the woman who could do no wrong, now she's been cast as the bad guy.
Starting with what this story is not. It is not just about Aung San Suu Kyi.
But do you think that now and forevermore Aung San Suu Kyi's reputation is tainted?
It is primarily about the Myanmar military, the flames and bullets it is used to dispossess Rohingyas, chase them from the country. And it's about a government information campaign that reeks of propaganda.
What's been interesting about this narrative is that the civilian government and the military seem to be speaking from the same script. The government has been using terminology like extremists, terrorists, separatists.
To make sure that terrorism is not allowed to take root on our soil or on the soil.
What that does, it appears to create this kind of hysteria, which many in Myanmar appear to be listening to, and which is fueling support for the military here.
A huge amount of the media focus has been on Aung San Suu Kyi, and almost all of it has been condemnatory. And as someone who's been campaigning for her and her release for 20 years, I'm incredibly disappointed. But she's not the one carrying out the ethnic cleansing. It's Min Aung Hlaing, the head of the military. He's not even being referred to in any of this media coverage.
The Myanmar Constitution limits the power of its civilian government. Aung San Suu Kyi and her ministers do not have authority over the military, which surrendered absolute power less than 3 years ago, after more than half a century of military rule. But Suu Kyi does have the power to criticize, and she has not criticized the forced eviction of hundreds of thousands of Muslim Rohingyas, up to 80% of whom, according to UNICEF, are women and children. She has neither criticized nor condemned the burning to the ground of villages Rohingyas have called home for centuries. She has neither criticized, condemned, or even publicly questioned the role of the military in what the UN says appears to be a textbook case of ethnic cleansing. What Suu Kyi and her government have criticized are the messengers, the international news media and UN workers documenting the story, dismissing their reports as fake news, and in one case, fake rape.
Dismissal and denial of well-documented accusations and allegations and evidence is part of genocide. Genocide is not just simply like pulling triggers and burning down houses and driving people out. Genocide involves denial. And for her, as a woman, as a Nobel Peace Prize winner, dismissing the reports of hundreds of women who have been wronged and violated, and Suu Kyi dismissing them as like fake news, fake rape. That was what you read on Aung San Suu Kyi's official Facebook page, fake rape.
And that's happening in a climate where the government has consistently been whipping up tensions using social media. Aung San Suu Kyi's information committee has been posting images of bodies hacked to pieces, of what it's alleging are weapons captured from the armed Rohingya organisation ARSA. It's a constant barrage that they're putting out every day.
About the Myanmar authorities and misinformation campaigns, they're not very good at them. If you're going to hand out still images to journalists as proof that Rohingyas are using machetes on their own people and setting their own villages alight, make sure that the woman you describe as Muslim is wearing a real headscarf, as opposed to what looks like a tablecloth. And make sure that when you then take those reporters to a refugee camp full of Hindus, that same woman is not there, uncovered, or at least suggest a change of clothing. And when taking the media on tour, make sure you keep those journalists corralled, so they can't break away from the group and find another village in flames, with Buddhists there admitting they are responsible and that they are working at the behest of the police.
They've only just been lit. In fact, we bumped into the people who almost certainly lit them, carrying machetes, not wanting to talk. Though one did admit, yes, they'd set these buildings alight.
The government says this is an example of us giving media freedom in this area, but it's simply not the case. You go where they want you to go to, you're followed everywhere you go by security forces, so people are too scared to really say what's happening. So the trips are useful in getting some grasp of what's going on the ground, but they're certainly not a true reflection of what's happening on the ground.
The state is feeding the domestic news media the same narrative, and it's being reinforced online. Social media was slow in coming to Myanmar. It's now booming. providing new platforms for figures such as Buddhist monk Ashin Wiritu. When he goes on Facebook and calls Rohingyas snakes and mad dogs, he has more than 400,000 followers who can spread that across other platforms. Back in the days of military rule, journalists from Myanmar fought hard for their freedoms. Some set up news outlets in exile. DVB, the Democratic Voice of Burma, beamed news into Myanmar from Norway. A news magazine called Irrawaddy based itself just across the border in Thailand, pushing a pro-democracy agenda. The magazine now operates out of Yangon, and on this story, like most of the domestic news media, has adopted the government's position. It refuses to call Rohingyas citizens of Myanmar. It calls them Bengalis instead. Irrawaddy's cartoonists depict Rohingyas as dark-skinned people cutting into the queue and suggest Bangladeshis are waiting at the western edge of the country, poised to invade. The magazine's editor, Aung was interviewed on CNN earlier this month. His line on the Rohingyas is in perfect harmony with the states.
Rohingya is not ethnic minority, belongs to Burma.
To present the 2014 International Press Freedom Award to Aung.
Back in 2014, Zhao and his magazine were lauded by the New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists for coverage of Myanmar that the CPJ called authoritative and independent.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here.
The most painful thing about the Irrawaddy is it's run by ex-political prisoners and longtime dissidents. These are guys who have been driven out of the country into exile by the military, now ex-freedom fighters joining hands with their former tormentors to portray the Rohingyas as terrorists.
It's incredibly disappointing to see this. The media that operated in Burma under the dictatorship, they've been very bad on this issue. But the media organizations that were based in exile were much more professional, were much more balanced in their reporting. But now if you see even some of them are towing the government line, it's very worrying for the whole future of press freedom and where people in Burma get their information.
That is the media landscape against which the Rohingya refugee story is unfolding. Icebergs of misinformation from both sides on multiple platforms. Civilian leaders now reading from the same script as the generals who once locked them up. Journalists, award winners, now backing the same military that sent them into exile. Ugly caricatures, imaginary enemies at the gates. Fake headscarves, fake news, and a fallen icon at the official, irreconcilable end of a media love affair.